so we've got it for later, because there's some good stuff that Linc Bowdern from Honda is going to share with you after I finish talking, based around the Africa Twin. So I did that little bit of that poll there for a bit of fun. Do you own a Honda? Yes. Do you own a 450 Africa Twins? Pretty close, 50-50. Mid-sized bike, is there already too much choice? No. Honda, so mainly Honda people. All right. That video behind me is the Madigan line, which is the northern end of the Simpson Desert. So I might get straight into it. So the stuff that I've put together is pretty basic. It's just a little PowerPoint. We'll run through basically what we do for Daryl Beattie Adventures around the CRF450L. And Africa Twin. There's not a lot we do the Africa Twin, to be honest with you. We leave it. The 450s actually we do a little bit accessory wise and bits and pieces just to make them a bit stronger, because they do a bit more of a variety of work. So I'll just get my little share screen here, and there we go. So you should have that up there now. Oh, there you go. That's a Honda genuine accessory. That was Cape York, I think, last year or the year before. We had a little visitor come into camp. Certainly made everyone zip up their beds. Tool rolls and stuff. I'm just going to touch on bits and pieces through here as we get to the bikes and what I do. Many of you probably already do this, but I just thought it was just a good chance. Probably, you know, in that role, like you all do, the best thing is to work on your bikes and then realize what spanners you need when working on the bikes, and then cull stuff down. I have a variety of stuff there because I work between the Africa and the 450. As you can see, my tire levers are, they're the 450 ones there, but I have the same set of those Motion Pros because they're super light. For the Africa Twin, because the axle sizes are different, chain breaker, spare links, all that sort of stuff I carry, bits of wire. But you know what? At the left-hand side of that picture, plastic repair kit, metal repair kit. They're probably the most valuable two things I have in my tool roll, because, you know, if you don't, you know, for example, on the canning stock route 3-4 years ago, I don't know why, but we had a chain go on a 450 and it knocked the back out of a piece out of the crankcase behind the sprocket. By the time we laid it on its side, cleaned around it, got that metal repair out, put the piece back on the crankcase, and just the heat residual off the crankcase, by the time we had a cup of coffee and some cake, it was all fixed, and that bike ran for ages. Fuel screens. Now, we fill out the back of our truck all the time, and our truck has a proper big aftermarket fuel filter on it. So, and it does get an enormous, I'll actually video it one day, but we had an enormous amount of red dirt and water collected in that filter after a season away. So it gives you a bit of an idea what garbage you collect out of some of the outback communities or stations you go to. So, so I use that in particular, not when I'm filling out of the truck, but I use something like that when we're separated from the truck and we fill on our own, just for that bit of security. Because as you can imagine, if I just try and, I might have to just stop share there for a sec. Are you still seeing all that? Or are you back to me?
No, still see the IMS tank up there.
Yep, perfect. So, yeah, so skipping on, so basically the fuel filter, super important. As you can imagine, It happened to me, I think, when we released the Africa last year. I was away, and I was the only one out of 11 Africas that must have got a dabble of water in a fuel fill that we did up at Columbaroo on the top of Western Australia. And I got home, but just that whole process of having to pull, bolts around the fairing, get the tank off, then have something literally when you're away from the truck to put that fuel in or get that water out. So I've got a little pump that I've sort of devised up now that helps with that when we're back at the truck, if that happens. So we just don't have to disassemble it, but just trying to eliminate getting water in there. So that those fuel filters and bits and pieces are good. CRF450L, if you're in that market, originally when we went to bigger tanks on those bikes, we used an Aussie brand, but we had issues with the fuel injection pump leaking around the bottom of the tank. So I didn't get a picture of the pump, but the OEM pump fits into that hole, as you can see in the bottom of the IMS tank there. And the O-ring is on the pump itself, and then you've got like a dust filter around the bottom. The tanks were expanding in the heat of the day, and we were getting leakage. So we've gone to the American tank, the IMS tank, and just to show you the bottom, that entry. So what they do is you take the OEM O-ring off the Honda fuel pump and that dust seal. They give you different size bolts, and it basically goes into the same spot there, but it just mushes the O-ring instead of it going into the tank and sealing like it does on the original titanium tank. And they've been perfect. Just got to be a bit careful with the brass inserts, as you can see there. Normally we run a bit of graphite on them every few times we use them, and just don't tighten them up too tight. You can see this one here, it's happened, just been on the run. We got a bit slack, and they won't send you bits to repair them. So you've basically you've got to get a new tank. So, I'll just go back to that. There we go. Radiators, pretty important on the new model 450L. We didn't run them first season because they have the plastic shrouds in the front for debris. But we've now gone to these, you can see in the picture, the top right and bottom left, just the support brackets, just to brace the radiators a bit more. Last year we had some come back and they were nearly S-shaped and still weren't leaking. They were extraordinary how much of an impact they would take. But just that bottom left picture, that bar there on the bracing spacer, just helps the side impact, and more so on the left side. Now they've got like I guess you'd call it a thermo fan that we didn't have on the 450X, which certainly helps when guys struggle in sand and the bike wants to, the old bikes would get a bit of a boil up until they got momentum again. Whereas these, they don't at all. But if someone takes a decent whack on the left-hand side, then that fan shroud normally gets damaged, and you can run with it not working. They're fine, especially if someone's not getting stuck in deep sand. But these shrouds, if you have a 450, make a hell of a lot difference and save you a bit of money replacing your radiator. Seating. So for me personally, on a 450, this is my bike, which I'll run again next year. So I did 18,000 Ks on that in a season before COVID. I changed this originally because I was running on an Africa Twin, and then I'd jump on a 450 next tour and then back on an Africa. And I just felt, I run the Africa at the highest seat height. I'm 175 centimeters, but I just like sitting up like that. Obviously, when you're in creeks and bits and pieces, your footing's probably not as good, but I just feel more comfortable because I stand a lot. So I find from the standing position to the sitting position is less of a squat. So it's less work over a day, a full day. So when I wanted to do some stuff to my 450, I ordered a seat, concept seat, you can see there, and I made it, it's about 40 mil higher. And then I've put bar risers, which you'll see in another picture soon, higher as well. So just that whole standing sitting process isn't as much. It's less tiring, and a lot more comfortable. If you tuned in a few weeks ago, we had the Krieger stuff. So I don't always run the Krieger, but if I'm doing filming for social media and bits and pieces, I'll run those Krieger packs, as you can see there. And I can stick my little drone in there and my camera, and sometimes I take a bit of weight off my back because I've got so much stuff stuffed in my backpack. I'll stick them on there and they work really well. That middle picture, I took a picture. So that's how they mount at the back. So you see that strap goes over the back guard. And then I didn't have to drill any holes in the aluminium, I guess, tail tidy. Well, it's not a tail tidy, it's a full size one, but you can get a tail tidy for the 450L. But that little loop there that clips into that elongated hole already on the 450, it fits in there. So I didn't have to do any drilling. So it worked quite well. So that's just my little 450 setup. This is probably the most important thing you'll do, I think, once you start traveling away. I know we've all got our helmet systems, but you'll know once you're any reasonable distance from your mate, they drop out. And even more so once you get into the deserts, you know, the height of the dunes, you'll pick them up on the top of the dune, but then the lull in between the dunes, you lose them. So that's what I'm running at the moment. And I'll be honest with you, it's still not the ideal system. I'm always looking for better. So I've just made that up, but I just run my UHF radio through the center Bluetooth system there, which then Bluetooths to my helmet through the center. And I run a push to talk on the handlebars. And it's safety. There's, you know, a few of you probably already doing the deserts, but you know, even the Simpson Desert now, leaving Birdsville, heading across, they've from last year, I think it started, they've put call points in where you call up, and it makes sense. You know, we try to avoid the busy times, but there's times when you can't. But your biggest fear is a head-on, let alone a car-to-car, which are climbing the dunes slowly, but a bike to a car, or, you know, it's just, we're so cautious with the tours, and that's why we have a lead rider and a sweep rider, but you're always worried. So we use that UHF a lot. Buddha leads our rides. If he's unsure or he's a crackling and knows there's cars or someone in the desert, then he'll pull up on top of the dune so he gets most penetration and make a call, you know, 11 bikes southbound, you know, 80 Ks from such and such, or 40 Ks or whatever it is. And if you're doing it solo or you're doing it with a couple of mates, it's just great security, let alone just being out in the open dirt roads and having that constant contact. So that little plate I made up the back there, I just use the ram on my handlebars that holds it. Kind of similar to my paragliding stuff I do that I fly. But the Bluetooth, you know, I think if you can get away from the center, my thoughts at the moment, some of you may have already done it, but to get away from that, just having extra devices and extra things to charge. So getting away from that center Bluetooth device and just having a Bluetooth UHF on its own direct to your unit. They're out and about in some pretty funky name brands, but they probably do the job. But that's the goal for me, to just get rid of things that you need to charge, so that when you're using your power traveler stuff, or, you know, for me, it's not too bad. We've got the truck, so power's unlimited, but You want to keep that stuff down. A little bit of what I carry in my pack. So the Garmin Mini InReach, which you would have seen on our Garmin night. I think that's a tool you carry all the time unless you're hiding from your missus. So it's phenomenal. I use it flying all the time as well. You send a link, bang, it's gone. Someone at home can be watching you the whole time. So there's that device in that little Krieger packs, my sat phone. We got a couple of those, and then a PLB. I don't really use the PLB that much anymore. It's a great tool if I was really wounded and I needed help, because I'm the sweep and I'm on my own. I could be on my own for 10 minutes or a couple of hours. But my view on that is, once you activate it, you can deactivate them. But if you activate it and your sat phone's not working and rescue's trying to get hold of you, a point of location, first of all, you got to make sure you update those every year. And I get an email reminder from the authorities to do it. Just make sure your phone numbers and the person they're going to call is all up to date. But the thing I love about the InReach more is that you can text off it as well via your phone linked. So if you do activate it and you really do need help, but it's not life-threatening, you can tell the authorities that, and it just makes the whole rescue, I think, situation a lot better than a PLB. But at the end of the day, they're all going to save your life, and it's important. And again, I just saw somewhere today, I was looking at some flying, paragliding stuff for an event, and they're making guys wear them all the time now. They're like, it's a must. I just slipped these in because I do think they're cool, and they are a sponsor. I'd admit that, but they are cool. We got them last year. Just Nava headlamps. They haven't got AA's or AAA's. They're just rechargeable. The one on the left's the bit flasher one, the bigger one, the head strap over the top, but they disconnect from the headband, and you can use them. If you're traveling on your own, you just, instead of carrying a heap of stuff, you just carry that. You can charge it during the day if you're solar power travel or whatever you're doing. It disconnects from that, and it's got magnets on the back of it, so it can stick on your bike tank or wherever and light up your camp or in your bed. The basic ones, just a push button on the side, different strengths. And then the flash one there, you wave your hand in front of it and it turns it on or off, which is pretty cool. CRF450L, longevity as far as chain guides go. It was one of the great things I loved about when the 450L was released, between that and the 450X. As I said, my 450L's done 18,000. They didn't need replacing, but I've just done it to start another new season, and they were probably going to need doing again during this season. But the 450X's, we were getting a quarter of that time out of, the chain guys, and we were running, even aftermarket ones. So the genuine 450L stuff wears really well. It's awesome. So the rear sprocket on a 450L will run easily over 10,000 K and looks pretty good. I know we've all been taught and told that you change it all at once, front sprocket, rear sprocket chain. I don't on the 450L, just because I get such good longevity out of a rear sprocket. I get probably, 5,000-6,000 Ks out of a front. I get that out of a DID chain, which we buy them because I like them. I find them better over other brands. Just have. So I'll do a sprocket, change a front sprocket, get two front sprockets to a rear, and then the chain. So handguards, bark busters is something you need to do on a 450L when you get it. They don't come with them. So we run those bark busters. I put a picture of the Africa Twin below. I run the standard ones, but in reality, my plan is to never fall off. And I don't often, but I do. And they do the job, but when you start going hardcore off road, in reality, you need something better. So I've put that in. That would be something I'd do to an Africa. Tires and tubes. These photos here are Africa, so Aniki Wilds on the front and on the rear. We run them pretty much everywhere. I've put a photo of that tube in, and you're probably already tuned in, some of you, to the Michelin night, but we made the mistake, and I think quite a lot of people made a mistake when the Aniki Wilds were released, and I'll just skip to the next photo, and that one there. We all started chucking in the 4mm UHD big tubes in the front. I did, in the front of that Aniki Wild. And we rarely get punches, but we do. And we were getting a bunch of punches with customers, and we were changing tire pressure, doing all sorts of stuff. Couldn't work it out. Eventually Buddha sort of half put his finger on it, and eventually a little while later, we sent stuff back to Michelin. They come back to us and said, "You're putting too big of a tube in the front of the Aniki Wild." You know, I was thinking thicker 4mm was going to always be better. So that more light weight tube, put that in. Very little punches now, unless someone's just purely making mistakes and walloping stuff. But so that was a good lesson learned, especially for us as well. So we ran the Aniki Wilds front and rear. Sometimes in the Kimberley, we'll run the Aniki Wild on the front and the Aniki Adventure on the rear, which is like a 50-50 tire. They do feel a little bit slick initially when you go to roll into a turn on sort of dry, gravelly roads, but the longevity you get out of it's pretty good, and not slick to bad. But if it rained heaps and it was muddy, then you'd be a fine balance. But then you got electronics and bits and pieces to play with to try and eliminate that. The picture I'm on now is 450 stuff. So that's our 450. That's the Michelin trackers, which we use in the deserts, because we don't get a heap of tyre wear in the desert other than either side of the desert out on the open roads. And they're the tubes we run on them. So the big heavy ass tubes. Rim locks. A 450L does not come with rim locks. So they're aftermarket, and we put those in just because we were in and out of creeks a fair bit. Not super low pressures, around that 16 psi, but we're getting a little bit of tire slip, so we put them in. So you can do that as well. Africa Twin, again, as I said, we leave it pretty stock. Just a test for Honda as well. These pictures, that's the standard bash guard, as you would know if you own an Africa Twin. This is the manual version. Ideally, you probably want a little more protection around those covers, crankcase covers. We had one about 3-4 years ago. A guy went down quite quick and tore the bottom of it out, and we had a spare, obviously, had in the truck, and replaced it. You could do it with that metal bond, like I said, as long as you've done no damage inside to the electrics. The shifter, Linc might know more about that, but I'm pretty sure the current Africa you can get a quick shifter for, which we're not running, but he might be able to mention that when he comes on in a sec. Yeah, so I would personally run a bigger bash guard on it just for safety, so you're not caught out. Air cleaner. I think there's a photo that's black there. Air cleaner, I just want to talk about Africa to air cleaner. So we do them on demand, basically because, you know, Buddha's bike out front leading a ride, which we might be like you guys off on a trip on your own or with a mate, is very different to a bike that's sitting in the middle of the pack for a, you know, a 2,000 or 3,000 K tour, or me at the back. One of the things I say all the time though is stay out of dust. It's the biggest danger, and it's the first way you're going to get hurt. So that photo on the right I've put there, it's probably need a video to do it. Air cleaners on them when you first do it seem a little challenging, but once you've done them once or twice, it's pretty simple. So you know, just undoing a few of the bolts around the top of the tank there on the side cowl, and then you just got the little plastic clips where you push the centers in, and then you just got to go around and pull it out of the rubber grommets. But definitely worth checking, especially if you've done a water crossing and dropped it. You'll find you'll attract more dust, and they do clog in that way. So, but in saying that, a water crossing on an Africa and a 450L, if you do drown them, and I have seen them underwater, tank and all, if they get it, if they turn it off like they're supposed to, and we tell them, and you get it up as quick as you can, and you sit and wait, generally you'll restart them pretty quick, especially in Africa. But you just got to, you sit and wait. And like any of the stuff now, you got to recycle the key. So if something happens, it's key off, key back on. If your key's left on and you wait 5 minutes to try and start it, it won't fire. You just got to recycle that key, and the 450 is the same. So, but you will find that a lot of that water will drain out and they'll go, and it's perfect. But the only thing you'll have to check down the track will be your air cleaners. A 450L, we can stand up tall on the back guard, and get the water out if it has sucked it in through the air cleaner. Foot pegs, one of the majors just to keep you comfortable. The picture on the left is a standard Africa foot peg. The picture on the right is a pivot peg. We buy them, they're not a sponsor, but when I first tried them, I felt quite rocky on them. It probably took me a ride to get my head around it. Now I love them. But you can see the difference, just that platform standing up all day, and being on your feet. I run them on my 450 and the Africa. Big difference at the end of the day. So super comfortable. So yeah, and the standard pegs come with the rubbers in them. So even if you take the rubber out, if you're not just riding on the streets, even that helps, just not having that pressure in the middle of your foot all day, just with that rubber out. But big pegs, a must. There's a side shot of that seat. It's a bit hard to tell compared to a standard one, but you can see with the big pegs, it's a bit flatter on top, so it's taller. So as I mentioned earlier, on the right, so those bar risers, they're 30 mil higher. Yeah, you don't have to do it, and I'm a bit slack like that at times. I'll just ride anything and get on with it. But when you do go to the effort, and because I'm on it a lot, you know, not compared to a customer who comes for 5 days or 7 days, or a canning that's 10, but when we're on them all year, it makes a difference. You just much more comfortable. A couple of talking points at the end. And you can ask questions, guys. There's not a heap here tonight, so if your microphone's open, or maybe I need to open them, I'm not sure, you can ask questions. But air cleaners on a 450. So there's so much debate around, and I think it's an interesting one for me because people talk about small capacity bikes, whether it's 250, 450. oh, I don't know about that as an adventure bike. I've got to change oil every 1,000 or 1,500 or whatever it may be. This is my opinion, not Honda's. What they recommend for the 450L, we have stretched oil changes to 2,000 Ks. We just try and do it per tour. Obviously, something like the stock route, it's over 2,000. We'll do an oil change in the middle of it. But we've got to the point now with the 450s where we're doing oil change, leave the oil filter, and do filter the next time around. And with, if you get to the 2000, yeah, you can see a difference in the oil when we were doing them at 1,500. But again, my thing's done 18,000 now. It's had a valve check. There's been no adjustments. It doesn't get a super hard life, but it sees a lot of different terrain and countryside. Air cleaners are just as important, just stopping that grit and stuff going in. We run socks just because it's simple for a tour as well. So we'll start the tour with clean air filters and a clean sock over the top. And it just saves pulling 11 air cleaners out, even though we've got 11 others there ready to go to bolt straight in. But if we can pull a sock off halfway through a tour and get a whole tour done on an air cleaner, depending on where we are, the deserts are better than somewhere in the Cape if someone's not listening to you and riding in dust. But the sock just lightens that workload. And I guess the point I'm getting to is in reality, if you had a 450 set up as an adventure bike and you did get to a point where you could do oil change every 2,000, that's a fair old distance. You're still getting to somewhere like the east coast of like Brisbane to Birdsville easily before you got to do an oil change, and it's quick and easy to do one. Obviously, depending on how much off-road you do between there and Birdsville, you probably don't even have to do the air cleaner. So, I think it's a great size bike if it sort of fits your bracket and you want to do more off-road and you're a bit intimidated by 200 plus kilos and you want to set a 450 up for a adventure bike. I don't see a problem with it. Oil changes. A lot of people think it's just, they want 5,000 or 10,000 Ks. And how many times do you do those tours? We do it in a month. We rack them up pretty quick, but when you're doing it personally, I think if you divided it in what you were doing a year, it wouldn't be that many. So I wouldn't let it deter you for your decision. Sure, you're going to have to carry a bit of oil, but it's bugger all. Africa Twins, we do on demand. They'll go a lot longer, but we do them at 5,000. But they'll go a lot longer. That's just us. Air cleaners, I mentioned, on demand, and then the water thing as well. That's my dog. I had to put her in. So I'll see if I can get out of that. There we go. So if I got to open your mics up, does anyone want to ask any questions, or can you guys open your mics up, or have I got to do it? If I've got to do it, just flick me a message. There's a text here. Are you using high gain antenna on UHF or stubby? I use the stubby. High gain would be fine, but as you can see in that back pit, that's the Madigan line. That's an early part of it coming from the eastern end. So not steep dunes there at the moment, so good penetration. But I find no matter what you use, like even our truck, the UHF aerial would sit, 3.5, 4 meters in the air, even on the truck, and you lose the truck in between dunes at times. So I don't think you'd find a massive difference, but certainly out in the flats and areas like this now and that on the Madigan line, where it's not, the dunes aren't steep there, penetration would probably help. So suspension on 450. 450, I just do the 1G thing, just my weight. So I'm about 80 kilo plus my riding gear plus my backpack. My backpack's ridiculous. So in reality, I'm probably 95 kilos with all my tools and bits and pieces, probably more, 3 litres of water, so nearly 100 kilos. So I just set it up for my weight. The tour bikes we leave just because we get a variety of people coming in different weights and sizes. So we leave them stock. But yeah, it certainly makes a difference. Africa's I leave completely standard. Every now and then I might wind up the rear preload, which is so simple to do. Just with my backpack carrying a bit of extra weight. Again, you could get bogged down in it, and you can yeah, sure, you're going to make them a little bit nicer, but I found with the last Africa Sport that got released compared to the previous model, which we'd done suspension to, the first model that was released, I didn't do anything to the last one just because I found it good. If you're hitting stuff hard and riding it more like a mid-size bike, then yeah, you're going to have to do it. But I find I'm riding plenty fast enough in the terrain we ride in without really having to do much to it. It's super comfy. They soak it up. You ride it like a 240 or 50 kilo bike. And the 450, yeah, I definitely either change the rear spring or wind springs up. We don't do any valving work on them. They're quite sufficient for what we're doing. Does the shock change how much responds it knocks my old car bike around? Oh, okay, yeah. Flano, yeah, no, it doesn't. On the 450X, funny enough, just carburation. If sometimes you'd start them without a filter, you notice a difference. Linc might be able to elaborate on some of that stuff maybe, but no, and we don't. I guess it's how you do your filter too, isn't it? You want to get good coverage of it, but you want to wring it out too. You don't want it fully soak so the thing can't breathe. And the socks, same. We soak the socks, but we wring them right out. On the 20 years, the electronics, no, I turn them all off. I do on the road. Like if it's raining, I do on the road. I'll turn it on, on the rear a little bit, have a bit of fun with it. But in this sort of terrain on an Africa, you got to have them off. It's too much interference. You don't need the traction control in the sand. So yeah, you got it all turned off. But in the Cape on the gravel roads and bits and pieces, you've got ABS on the front always. But I turn the ABS off on the rear, especially for downhill stuff and electronic wise. And creek crossings, as you would know if you own in Africa, you want to be able to turn that stuff off on the fly. And Linc's gonna run through all that tonight. It's quite in depth. It's really helpful. It's stuff that he used. Linc is from head office based in Queensland, but he did the launch for us when we launched the current model 1100 in Alice Springs. So the stuff he'll show you tonight is a bit more in depth on the dash. So yeah, on the 20 years electronics with the fuel injection, you're running the fuel line micro filters. No, so there wasn't a lot of pictures of Africa Twin stuff tonight because purely for that fact, we leave them standard. Not Honda don't ask us to, but it's just good feedback for the customer, not having to know that we're going to do major modifications. 450, we do a lot of little stuff to it, but it's been used a little bit differently. But in saying that, I've ridden my Africa on all the stuff you see in the background, the Canning Stock Route, Cape York. I rode Africas for 2 years on all the tracks we ride 450s. And yeah, it's a lot more work. But yeah, so filter-wise, Africas have been great, all standard. Like I said tonight, for an Africa Twin, the only thing that I'd be doing is, things just to make you more comfortable, whether it's bar risers, grips, bark busters, maybe some radiator stuff just to help protect them a bit more. being careful of where you fill in communities, having that strainer or filter to help, foot pegs. If you've got no pillions and you don't need your rear foot pegs to tie down your luggage or your gear, I find they're better off, but you might need them for your straps. And I say they're better off because at times I have found myself, in the deep sand, maybe where you get a bit messed up and your foot slips back. Depending if you wear over boot gear or tucked in gear, it can make a big difference, but you can get hooked up on that back peg sometimes and it can be frustrating. So if you use it for stuff, leave it on. But if, my Africa, which I just keep aside for the year, I take it off. So if there's no more questions, I'm going to hand you over to Linc Bowdern. He's one hell of a good man. His mobile phone is on 24 hours. I can ring him whenever I want if I'm in trouble. But yeah, Linc's going to run you through some more in-depth Africa stuff. So if you don't own an Africa and you're thinking about it, or you do own an Africa, I'm sure this will help, because other than just using it all the time, this info he's got is good. So all over to you, mate.
Thanks, Daz. I'll jump in. So yeah, when for those of you, there's probably a couple of guys out there that actually own Africa Twins. You guys will be sort of fairly familiar with it, but for those that don't, it's always one of the biggest departures from the outgoing model to the incoming model is the addition of this new multi-information display screen, which we'll jump into now and have a bit of a look-see. All right. You guys seeing that okay?
Yep. Good, mate.
Right, cool. So when you first jump on the bike, it's quite a big difference from the old one. It's a big, full 6.5-inch color thin film transistor touchscreen. So you can actually touch the screen and change some of the functions if you like, or you can actually use the left-hand handle switch to control the inputs. Initially, when you jump on it, there's quite a lot of information to run through. And if you're like me, the first time you sort of got to try it was when you were sort of heading off down the road and you're busy trying to look at the screen and do all the adjustments. So I would recommend you sit down in the garage and have a bit of a play with it first. So when you're out on the road, you're not trying to do what I did and try and learn on the fly, which can be a little bit tricky, especially when trying to turn off some of the functions or the electronics when you're almost knee deep in sand and going nowhere in a great hurry. It's not that much fun. So you'll see up above here, we've got the main information display, but down below we also run this backup display as well. So that one's there. At first you might think it's a bit odd having two speedo sort of readouts and gear position display, but when we actually get into some of the different screens, all that information drops off the top there, and then all that you're left with to sort of get an indication of your speed and gear position, and the rest of the idiot lights down below is that unit down the bottom, especially when you do have your navigation hooked up through this as well. It's super bright. We had no issues on the launch with this thing, and there was quite a bit of feedback from some of the journalists that come along on the ride. They were quite impressed as to how bright and easy it was to read whilst on the tour. Just above the screen, you can see this little sort of extended piece that comes out from the dash, and that gives you enough sort of shade or to stop the light from hitting it at that angle where you can't actually see it. So, and it adjusts to day and nighttime riding, so it's super bright in the daytime and then will adjust to nighttime. With the display itself, we get 3 levels of information that you can actually be displayed on the screen, and they call those gold, silver, and bronze displays. And each of those displays, it sort of decreases the information that you can see. So if we start off with the gold display, which is the standard for tour mode, it's the maximum amount of information that can be displayed on the screen at any given time. So you get your rider mode up here on the top left. Down below there, we have our little sub-menus with 4 different sort of selections through the sub-menus, but we'll have a bit more of a chat about that later on and what is actually contained within those sub-menus. Gear position, engine coolant temp, speedometer. And with your riding modes, each of these items down here, so we've got the P for power, E for engine brake, T for our Honda selectable traction control, or HSTC, or torque control, is adjustable, and the settings are set per riding mode. For our dual clutch transmission bikes, so our automatic bikes, we run a G switch. Now the G switch controls the amount of clutch slip that you get. So when you're off-road and the G switch is active, you're getting direct drive from the engine to the rear wheel. So there's no slip in that clutch. It's all the torques from the engine straight to the rear wheel. When you're in a road situation, you don't sort of want that. So imagine on the auto bike, if you're trying to pull a U-turn and being very steady on the throttle, if you're getting that direct power, it's going to be very jerky as you're sort of pulling around for the turn. So with the G switch off, you get a certain amount of clutch slip. So when you're sort of winding the power on to do a bit of a U-turn or slow speed maneuvering, it's almost like you're slipping the clutch sort of manually. As Daryl mentioned before, with the in some of the riding modes, you can actually switch the ABS off to the rear, which gives you that better stability, especially always ABS on the front. It allows you to sort of lock the rear and turn, steer with the rear a little bit more when you're in that off-road. And for the bikes that are equipped with our electronic suspension, the last one over here, the S, is the overall setting for the suspension. So you can have 4 different suspension settings, ranging from hard, medium, soft, and then into off-road. And that's just a general overall setting, depending on what sort of riding style you're doing. Get the heated hand grips for those models fitted with it up the top there, and then in the top left, all of the functionality of the Bluetooth. Got your headsets connected there, whether it's connected via USB or Bluetooth, and CarPlay functionality as well. Moving into the silver display, you can see it's taking quite a bit of information off the screen. It's a little less busy. Over here we have a display of the riding mode in which we're in. Larger fuel gauge, tacho a little bit different, still running the speedometer, but we've dropped some of the options out of here. We still get the power, engine brake, and the traction control setting, ABS. We lose the G switch, but we still have the overall suspension setting for those bikes that are fitted with those options. This one is the standard setting for the urban mode, and then jumping down into off-road mode. So this would be the least amount of information that you could be displayed. And as you can see in this one, this is our off-road mode. So it's nice and big if you just want to keep an eye on the tack whilst you're sort of standing and riding through some of the tighter stuff. I did find it a little bit tricky whilst I was standing to focus on the dash anyway, because I'm more worried about what I'm going to hit ahead of me rather than what's sort of down there on the dash there. So in pure off-road mode, you're sort of more focused on what's sort of coming up ahead anyway. So and this is where the that lower speedo sort of comes into its own then down the bottom there. So also with this new one, we've got the Bluetooth connectivity and comes with Apple CarPlay. So when you do hook up with the Apple CarPlay and connect it through a headset, you lose all that display up the top there, and it's pretty much the same as most modern day cars now that do come with Apple CarPlay. If you've seen that in action before, you do lose all that top screen, but again, the lower speedo comes into effect with your gear position and speedo, and then the navigation side of things as well. And we'll just jump in through to a little simulator here. I'll see if we can get that up and working. We'll try new share. We'll go with, where are we? Try that. All right. Does that come up on the simulator, Daz?
Yeah, all good, mate.
Awesome, no worries. So when we first launched the bike to try and familiarise ourselves with this, our good friends over at Honda America came up with a bit of a simulator for us. So as you can imagine, sitting yourself on the bike, you've switched it on. and you've got tour mode up in front of you there. Now, using the left-hand handlebar switches, the up and the down buttons here will start flicking you through your actual rider mode. So we'll jump from tour mode into urban mode. And if you keep an eye on when I jump from tour mode into the different modes, the power, the engine brake and the traction control and some of these other switches here will start to change depending on what sort of mode you're sort of riding in. So with urban mode, you see we've dropped the power. So with the P, the power, 1 bar is full power, 2 slightly less, 3 slightly less, till you get around to 4, which is the softest power setting. Engine brake is the same. 1 is the maximum engine braking and 3 is the least amount of engine braking in this one. Traction control, when it's all the way around to 7 here, is the most amount of intervention with the torque control, and then all the way around to 1 to be the least amount of intervention there. Moving through urban mode, jump into gravel mode. So you can see when you're in full gravel, you've got least amount of engine power, engine braking, and your traction controls kind of dialed up. So it's trying to keep the bike in line as much as it can for you in gravel mode. In off-road mode, again, it's similar sort of power settings. Most of the power difference is really in the lower throttle setting. So you're going to notice it more through to about half throttle, and then from about sort of half throttle all the way to full throttle, that's when a lot of the power settings become pretty much the same as each other. So it's really down in the lower settings when you're in some of the tighter, trickier stuff in the off-road and the gravel mode is where you sort of notice the big difference between the different modes and the different settings. So we have 4 factory preset modes on the Africa Twin, which is tour, urban, gravel, and off-road. And with all those settings, you can't change the power, engine braking, and traction control. They're all preset depending on which mode you're in. When you move into user 1 and user 2, so you could have user 1 set up for rainy days, and then sort of user 2 set up for pure off-road, depending on how you like it, or if your wife jumps on the bike and wants user 2 and then user 1, if that's a thing, you can set those up any way you can. So to start adjusting these user modes, we've got these little switches that sit up on top of the left-hand switch block. So by giving this one a bit of a long pull towards the rider, you jump into your sub-menus. Using the little down arrow, you can scoot down into the settings menu, and then you've got the little enter button over here on the left-hand side there. So clicking the enter, you'll jump into the next sub-menu and then enter again into function. We get into user mode. So when we jump into user mode, we can jump into user mode 1. Now we've got the option of setting user mode 1 to exactly what we want to do, how we want to set it, what riding style we like. So with this simulator, it's saying that we've got one of the Africa Twin DCTs with full electronic suspension, so we can go to town and adjust whatever we like. So using the down arrow, the power, engine brake, overall suspension damping, you can kind of set between what you like, but then you can actually fine tune that suspension damping as well, between the medium and button it off front and rear as well. ABS, you can set that up whether you want it on or off depending on which user mode. You can also set preload as well. So for when you have rider, rider and cargo, rider and passenger, and then rider, passenger and cargo, you can set all that up in the suspension. So that's all preset when you jump into user 1 mode. Backing out of the screen, you can hit the back button there, or if you want to jump straight back into the user menu, you just give that button another pull, and that'll take you back up to your main screen here. Now the little sub menu here, that's controlled by that little toggle switch in the middle. So if you toggle that one across to the right, you'll jump into sub menu 2. So you've got trip A, trip B, some consumption figures, average speed, and those settings. You can actually change what sits in those little sub menus there in the settings. So if we click enter on the settings and we go down to display, and then we go down to favorite information here. So we'll jump into there. So now that gives us a little look at our sub menus. We can sort of work through that if we want to leave average consumption in there, but we want to get rid of average speed and we want to change it for something else, we'll click enter, and that'll jump through into this little sub menu here. So you can work your way through that sub menu and say, all right, I want to look at elapsed time. We'll keep that one on there. And then that brings that across into that little sub menu there for you. So you can customize these sub menus to your heart's content. Jumping into sub menu number 2 and then sub menu number 3, where you can run battery voltage. You can look at all manner of things in there, date and time, trip, distance to go, and that sort of stuff as well. Jumping back out into here, if we jump right across into the 4th sub menu. So this is where you can start adjusting things on the fly with this unit. So depending on what mode you're in, we can start changing some of these things. So if we get into tour mode, for example, if I click enter, and you can do this on the fly, jump straight into the traction control setting. Now I know if I'm coming along, and you may not be in tour mode, you may be in off-road mode, but you know you're up for a bit of a sandy section. I was quite surprised, and Daryl sort of mentioned that when they're out in the sand, they do turn all the electronics off because there's just too much intervention, and it ends up making the bike going nowhere in a big hurry, which I was quite surprised at. I thought, you could actually pretty much drop it down on the lower setting and still have some forward momentum, but no, you come to a big stop in a big hurry. So when you jump into submenu number 4, if you click enter, it drops it down into here. So now we can start changing things. And the way we do that, we can turn our traction control setting off altogether. And we use that with the little toggle switch here. We just one long push to the left, and that turns it off to 0 completely. So on the fly, you see your sandy section coming up. You can, when I was riding on the tour, I pretty much had it just left with those submenus in this kind of setting. So then I could actually do a lot of this on the fly without having to then go through the submenus. If something came up fairly quickly, you're pretty much in the right place to do it at the right time. To turn it back on, you can just push it all the way across to the right, and it will always revert to the setting you had before you actually turned it off. Moving down into our wheelie control. So this bike is fitted with what we call an IMU. It's an inertia measurement unit, and that sits roughly in the center of the motorcycle. That measures pitch, roll, and yaw of the motorcycle at any given time. It's a 6-axis IMU, and that feeds information into the bike's systems, like for ABS, traction control, wheelie control, and all these settings, and does some pretty fast and fancy calculations and helps make you a better rider than you actually are, or anyway. So with the wheelie control, you can turn that off. So if you're like our friend Trevor Hedge and you like pulling big wheelies everywhere, you can switch that all the way off again. Clicking it all the way to the left, we'll switch that wheelie control off, and then pushing it across the right, we'll switch it back on to the setting that you had. Now, if you switch all that off, you pull up at a section, switch the bike off, sit down, have a rest, jump back on the bike, its default position is always going to go back onto the setting that it was originally on before you switched it off. So safety first, pretty much the same as the traction control in a car. If you switch that off and switch the ignition off, switch it on again, the traction control is always back on again. So it doesn't matter who jumps on the bike, they're not going to take off and have no traction control or wheelie control, because that's how you like the setting. Moving down the sub menu, we get into the preload section. So this is for the units with the electronic rider suspension. You can actually set the preload. Now, to do this, you have to be at a standstill. You can't actually do this on the fly, but we can set it for one helmet. If that's blue, that's just for single rider. If we click to the left, we now get the suspension stiffening up a little bit in the preload for a suspension and some luggage. Then if we click that again, we go to rider and a pillion, and then all the way across we get rider, pillion, and luggage as well. And the suspension changes. You can actually feel it while you're sitting there, move up and down on the preload. It's a bit of a funny feeling at first, but yeah, you need to be at standstill to do that one. Jumping down to the gravel switch, we can turn that on or off depending how you want it. At the moment, it's in cancel mode. Or switching that on to active. Now you'll notice if we go all the way back up the top, I can't go any further than HSTC, the traction control, because in tour mode, the ABS is always set to on-road, so that's front and rear. If I wanted to turn that off, I'd have to be in user 1 or user 2 mode and have that preset. Or if we go down to, if we jump back out of there jump down to off-road mode. And if I enter into sub menu 4 now you can see that's blue. I can actually turn that on or off. Now if I hold that to the left, it's going to come up with a big warning and say, hello idiot, do you want to turn off the ABS? Say, yes, I do. Give it a click. And now ABS rear is cancelled. Now on that dash at the bottom of the screen, you'd actually see a little picture of a motorcycle, have ABS and a little arrow pointing to the rear that actually says your ABS is off on the rear. So that's pretty much that one there. This little button over here is what we call our favorites menu. So you can set that up. If we go back to our settings, jump into enter. Now if we go down to back up to display, where we had our favorite, and underneath here we've got our favorite switch, so we can jump into there. So now we've got a choice of what we want that switch to do. We can set it to do our torque control, wheelie control, riding modes, or gravel switch. So instead of having to go into those little sub menus and working out where you're going, we can actually set this button to do the job. So if we select traction control, so we want to select that one, we jump back out onto our main menu. If I hit that one there, you can actually see the wheelie control. You can see that moving when I'm hitting the little switch there. So you can actually cycle through the settings for wheelie control, whether it's full intervention or least amount of intervention. Switch that off, and you can do that for your torque setting or for the rider modes as well. So just pushing that one button rather than the up and down toggle switches as well. This little button over here is part of our, can't see that over there at the moment. It's a little function switch. So it's the volume switch. It's for the heated hand grips. It will actually turn that. If I just move this over to here, where I got there. Pushing this one now, this little button over here is on the right-hand handlebar. So if I give that one a bit of a push, you can actually see that the brings up the icon for the heated grips. And by pushing that forward, I'm turning the heat up on the heated grips, or by pulling it back, I'm going to drop that down. So turning the heat on the heated grips down. We give this button a little push again. Now this is for the daytime running lights on the bike. So in auto mode, the bike will actually sense when the sun's up, it's super bright, the headlights will be off, but the daytime running lights will be on underneath the headlights there, and that's in auto mode. When the sun goes down, the light sensor will pick up the difference in luminosity, and then it will actually switch the daytime running lights off and bring the headlight on. So that all happens in the auto mode. If you wanted to switch that off and just have the headlights on fully all the time, you just put that into dismiss, and that would actually then change. And then moving across just back into volume. So this is your master volume for any of your Bluetooth settings or any of the connectivity that you had running through your headsets. That would be the master volume for the whole unit itself. So that's pretty much in a nutshell, really. It's a whole lot of information to take in. As I said, at the end of the 3 days we had with Daryl on the tour, we sort of finally got my head around. You kind of stick to one of your favorite screens and favorite settings, and then run with that and then use it. But there's a whole bunch of functionality in there. Some of the settings in there we couldn't sort of get into tonight because it's not activated on this simulator, but is some of the displays. So you can actually set your display. So for tour mode, even though it's got the gold level information, you could actually set it to the urban mode sort of display, or the bronze level or the silver level. So for each of those preset riding modes, you can actually select what information you want it to display from there. So in the service information as well, you can set your oil change schedules in there, Bluetooth connectivity hookup, and a lot of the other general stuff, which is just date and time sort of functionality, units of display. So yeah, adjusting clocks, dates, times, that sort of thing. Pretty much just the standard kind of stuff. But as far as all your riding information goes, we've sort of covered off on that this evening there. So any questions on anything any of you guys have seen this evening? I'll stop sharing that one there. Yep.
I'll just have a look in chat for you there, Linc, but
yeah, please.
And if any of you guys want to ask questions, just open your mic if you want, but I'm just looking in the chat. No questions, so.
Great job then.
Pretty good, yeah. Hey, I do though. I have a question. The star button that you mentioned that you can use, and you said you can use it for HTSC. If you hold that star button down, does it then go to 0? No.
No, it doesn't actually. No, that was one of the things that we looked at trying to do on that launch there, because I know the old one did have that lever you could pull, and that we put on the fly, but I think they've made this one just a little bit trickier. But no, I tried it. I pushed it as much as I could, and nothing happened. So, yeah, all done on that toggle switch.
Yeah. Can you change the front size? Oh, the font size for us blind blokes. Yeah.
It was pretty small on the screen. I apologize, but actually, when you're on the bike, it's pretty big. I mean, I wear my glasses to do a lot of computer stuff, but out riding, didn't need them. There was quite a bit of it's quite chunky out there to see. So Android, not too sure on that. We've only just got it for the Goldwing, so I'm pretty sure the idea would be to roll that out through to the other models. So just be a way of getting it into the actual unit itself. I know with the Goldwing, it's through the USB setup that they have there. So we do have the option to sort of jump into the screens on these, but yeah, haven't seen anything for the Android as yet. Apple CarPlay HEMA maps, not too sure on that. Did you have a HEMA map chap on earlier on in the piece?
Yeah, it's like cars as well. It won't work through Apple CarPlay on a car, or it's either an app or their own unit.
Yeah, so I know you can use Waze on this, or any of the other sort of maps and that sort of stuff. We've tried that, but or anything that works with Apple CarPlay will work on this unit as well. So,
all right. Any more questions? Thank you, Linc.
No worries, man. Thanks for having us.
How's the Northern Territory?
It's good, actually. It's a bit of a storm rolling in this afternoon, so I'm down to Catherine tomorrow. So it's green. I've never seen it this green in all the times I've been here. Speaking to Steve from Cyclone Motorcycles today, he said the rains have come early and they've come pretty hard. So yeah, it's just that normal yucky, humid build-up time of year up here, mate. But no, it's good.
All right. Thanks, Linc. Thank you, everyone.
No worries. Cheers, thank you.
Our next chat, I'm trying to do same time again next Tuesday. We might do some medical stuff, which would be really cool. I spoke to the guy that does our renewals every year, and he's going to try and put something together just for when you're traveling solo, or just a couple of, if something happens, just the basics and what you can do. So that'd be pretty useful, I think. So hopefully next Tuesday night we'll have some medical stuff, and then I think the following week Steve Jennings from Alpine Stars is going to join us and talk everything Alpine Stars. So but yeah, I'll post something up in the next few days for next Tuesday night at 7:30. See everyone. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.